I can still remember 18 years ago when I was 20 years old and just started trying to learn to pick up women. I hadn't heard of the pickup community, and the book The Game by Neil Strauss hadn't been written yet. I just knew I wanted to go into a bar and meet women. It seemed so obvious to me that this is what all men did organically, and I just needed to push myself to do it. Oh, how simple it all seemed in my own head before I set foot in that bar for the very first time. It didn't turn out how I hoped. The first woman I approached just ignored me like I hadn't even said anything. And the second woman cut me off after 30 seconds and said she wanted to go and find her friends. This first experience hit me hard. I had a strange and very unique sense of shame and embarrassment that I'd never really experienced before. Like, obviously, I did something foolish and wrong with these women to respond to me this way. In fact, I'd go on to feel this very particular kind of shame and embarrassment for years to come on my journey trying to understand dating. I'd feel it when asking a woman for a phone number. I'd feel it when trying to go in for the kiss. I'd feel it when asking a woman home. And a few years later, I discovered that I'd experienced that exact same feeling when I went into a hard sales job, walking into businesses and cold selling. It was only years later, when I started talking to other guys about my struggles meeting women, that I realized that most men experience this odd and unsettling sense of shame, like we don't belong there, or like we don't deserve to be doing or saying the things we're doing or saying. What I and so many men were struggling with is something I later learned is called ego-strength, and that's something I want to talk to you about today. Before I continue, guys, I just want to remind you all to like this video and subscribe to my channel. The bigger this channel grows, the more content I can create for all of you. So that unsettling feeling so many of us guys struggle with has its roots in having a poor ego. We don't feel like we deserve to be where we are. We don't feel like we are entitled to be heard. We are ashamed of expressing what we want because rejection will just confirm the fear that we aren't good enough. And that confirmation would just be too painful. Later in life, I learned to give men an analogy to know what a stronger ego strength should feel like when approaching women. Imagine you aren't trying to pick up women in a bar. Instead, I give you a briefcase full of cash, and you just have to give it to an attractive woman you think is cute. For most of you, this would turn the tables. You have something that society has agreed definitely has value. How much more comfortable would you feel about approaching women to give this to them? If you went up to a woman and she didn't accept the briefcase because she didn't like the color of the briefcase, or because the briefcase was too small, or because she already had too much money and wasn't interested, would you now feel worse about your briefcase with money? I'm guessing the answer is hell no. It's still a briefcase of money and you know it's got value. Just obviously not to everyone. In fact, you'd probably have a huge chuckle with your mates about the women who turned down the briefcase of cash because she didn't like the color, right? Now, I know the briefcase example is a little bit glib, but it's basically how you should feel as a man if you really valued yourself and had high ego strength. Ever since I became aware of this idea of ego strength, I found myself idolizing certain men in movies when they'd exhibit this trait strongly. And surprisingly, it's often older, powerful men who exhibit this trait in movies. They're not cocky or arrogant. They trust in their instinct 100%. They assume their value to be obviously unquestionable. Examples of this are men like Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones, and I know he's a bad guy, but Eddard Stark was also pretty high in ego strength, as was his wife and daughter Arya. Sir Anthony Hopkins in almost every movie he's been in, but I always reference Meet Joe Black because this is the first time this character trait of his was kind of flagged for me mentally. Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, and Daniel Craig in his latest couple of James Bond movies. The reason why Hollywood gives powerful men and women this trait is that when you have high ego strength, it's damn hard not to find success. You know what you're worth, you know what you deserve, and you have exactly 0% shame about going for it. Imagine going through life with this degree of belief in yourself. Now, I'd like to be the first to say I'm not perfect in this arena myself. In the real world, outside of Hollywood, nobody is perfect. But I can honestly say that I truly like myself. And I don't mean this in that superficial way that Instagram girl you follow says she loves herself. I mean that I'm flawed and fucked up and insecure sometimes. There'll be things about me that aren't ideal. There are things about me some women will just not like. There may be things about me some women will be disgusted by. There are things about me I suppose I'd change if I had a magic genie hiding somewhere. But I'm truly comfortable with most of that. And I also believe I have value in spite of that. Now, my value isn't to anyone in particular. Some people will value me to varying degrees, but I know that I have value just as much as that briefcase with cash has value. And yes, I still get faced with situations where I find my own ego strength getting challenged. I have trigger points and wounds that aren't 100% healed because I'm human and not a Hollywood character. But this journey to building my ego strength has taken me to a place I couldn't really understand when I first began this journey. So how did I get here? What's the big reveal I have to give you guys? Well, a huge part of it was truly realizing just how flawed we all are. And I mean that in a way that's deeper than just the logical understanding that, of course, everyone has flaws. I mean it in a way that I know in my gut to be flawed, insecure, self-doubting, sometimes walking around with emotional wounds is so bloody normal. It would be depressing if it didn't make me feel so powerfully connected to the world. A world that I spent so much of my life feeling like I was somehow separated from, living inside of my own neuroticism in my head. This deep understanding came from vulnerability, of all places. The more I shared my neuroticism with other people in my life, my friends, my family, women, therapists, the more they reflected back their own neuroticisms, their own flaws and turbulent internal worlds. In fact, when I meet someone now who looks emotionally flawless, I'm no longer impressed. Instead, I'm slapped in the face by how stressful the work must be that they're doing to maintain that facade for the world. Now, I know I've spoken about vulnerability before, and I'm going to keep hitting it from different angles over time because it's just such a powerful part of our journey as men into becoming more confident, comfortable, self-accepting men. Men who approach a woman and want her to like him, but whose ego doesn't need her to like him. Men who don't feel shame at the thought of being rejected because their value isn't up for debate. Diving into the intense power of masculine vulnerability is something I do with men in Australia in a live-in retreat called The Dangerous Man. And if you live in Australia, then you should be checking it out. It is the best program I've built in my entire life. But if you don't, then I'd recommend 2 audiobook programs by Brené Brown as a starting point. The first one is called The Power of Vulnerability. Now, this is actually a recording of a live event she ran a while ago now, but it genuinely played a role in changing my life and the way I see myself as a man, and I find it much better than a lot of her other books written at around the same time. The second is her brand new book called Atlas of the Heart. Now, don't let the soppy name turn you off. This book is a really amazing course on understanding the deeper natures of all the complex emotions we as men experience. It will give you the language to start vulnerably sharing your world with others. Now, I just want to make clear here, guys, I'm not giving links. I'm not looking for money for recommending these books. I'm just recommending them to you because I think they're powerful. For the rest, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and I look forward to seeing you all next time.